Hey there, everyone. This is Sinema77, horror and cult film lover. I'm back with another movie review. Um, I've been kind of procrastinating on this one a little bit, and I figure I better go ahead and do this one. Just go ahead and get it done. Now, hopefully, this video is not going to take too long. If it does go on for a while, I do apologize. But this is one of those kind of instances where I felt like if I'm going to, because we're going to talk about the original movie and the remake, and in case you haven't already I'm pretty sure by clicking on the title of the video, you already know. We're going to talk about the movie Lolita. Okay. You know, arguably, probably about the most controversial story ever written. But so I'm going to try to keep it as short as I possibly can. But if this video does go long, I do apologize. But I don't know. I tend to. It's like if I'm going to review a movie and if it's got a remake to it, I tend to want to, like review both of them at one time because it just seems like, when you review the original, then you come back, you review the remake, you kind of feel like you're just repeating yourself. So I thought I'd just kind of go ahead and get everything all done in one video. So hopefully this works out pretty good. Okay, like I said, Lolita is probably about the most controversial story ever written. I think especially in today's climate, it would definitely be considered as a very problematic kind of a film, but based on the book by Vladimir Nabokov, and the book came out in 1955, and the thing was I think he tried to get it published, like in the States and other places, and like when they read it, they figured the book, it was too risque, it was too much of a taboo subject, and so they decided, no, we're not going to do this. Ultimately, he finally got the book published in France, and I think honestly, now don't quote me on this, but I think honestly, I think what ended up happening, the book came out and it was a bestseller. It did, sold a lot of copies and stuff like that, and book made a lot of money and everything else. And usually, what always ends up happening in those situations happened with this is, uh, you know, producers from Hollywood, they start looking into it and they're all like, well, wait a minute, here's this book out, it's a big bestseller, selling tons of copies and everything else. And, how do we go about making this into a movie? And I think they probably in the beginning thought there's no way possible this movie could be, or this book could ever be turned into a movie. Because, for those of you who are not familiar what the story is about a man who basically kind of forces, a 14-year-old girl, a grown man, you know, a mature man, forces a 14-year-old girl to have a sexual relationship with him. So basically, it's a story about a pedophile. So I think at the time, I could be wrong about this, but I think they figured like this book was unfilmable. Like nobody could ever come along and turn this into a movie. It's not practical, things like that. Well, here comes Stanley Kubrick and James H. Harris, his producing partner, and I think they kind of looked at it as like, you know, let's take a shot at it. Let's challenge accepted. So they went and they made the movie, and the movie came out, and it was pretty scandalous at the time. Um, so definitely became very notable and everything. And then in 1997, Adrian Lyne decided he was going to do a remake of the movie, and this one stars Jeremy Irons and Dominique Swain. I'll get to that in just a minute. And this here is pretty much it's the same story about a grown man who, pretty much forces a young 14-year-old girl to have a sexual relationship with him. Now, the main character of the story is his name goes he goes by the name Humbert, and this guy, you realize he's not a good guy. He's not a trustworthy narrator or any of that kind of stuff. He kind of like like one thing. Okay, like we're gonna start talking about the Kubrick movie first, and one thing I will say that the Kubrick movie did that I don't know if any movie's ever done that before Kubrick did it. Sorry, or if anybody's ever done it since. But one thing that I thought was very, very interesting that Kubrick did, he put the climax of the movie at the beginning of the film. It's like I said, I don't know too many other filmmakers that ever did that. First of all, I better say, because it's going to be kind of hard to explain this without getting into spoilers. So I may as well just up and say right now, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. There's going to be spoilers in this review. So anyway, so the story, you have James Mason, the late great James Mason. He's playing Humbert, and he's traveling around. At the beginning of the Kubrick film, he goes and he, searches for this man named Claire Quilty. And Claire Quilty, if you can see by here, is actually played by Peter Sellers. Peter Sellers, we all know from, we know him from the Pink Panther movies and stuff like that. It's like great, comedic genius actor, stuff like that. And he goes to see him, and Sellers gives this really good, funny performance, and he's got some very memorable lines there. He goes to see him, and you could tell, like, you know, uh, Quilty is pretty much, he's drunk out of his mind, he's on drugs, stuff like that, and so it's like Humbert is trying to get him to understand, like, do you understand what's going on here, and all this other kind of stuff, and Quilty's talking about like he goes to take a drink, he's all like pulls out a cigarette butt out of his mouth, like, I'm just dying for a drink, a little drinky winky. And, it's like, why my friends put their smokies out in the drinky? Somewhat sanitary and stuff like that. And so, Humbert gives him a note, and he's like, I want you to read this and understand why I'm going to kill you. And so, so Quilty takes in, he's reading the note and all this kind of stuff. And he's just kind of like, is Peter Sellers doing a great comedy improv and everything else. And, saying funny lines and things like that. And so ultimately, James Mason pulls out a gun, and he's like, are you ready to die and all this stuff? And so, he puts on these boxing gloves like, hey, I'm ready to go out like a champion and all this stuff. So Mason fires the gun, and now, he's pretty scared now, and he's all like, yeah. So he tries to run and get away from him, and he's hiding behind a painting and stuff like that. And Mason shoots him from about, he's hiding behind the painting, but Mason shoots through the painting to hit him. And it's funny because Pierce Sellers, like, ow, that hurts. He shoots him again and again until he dies. Then the story moves along. Then you go into, now we go to the beginning of the story. And we're going to show you all the events that lead up to what just happened, why this murder came to be. So now you got, James Mason, he's the narrator because he's the narrator of the book and stuff. And you can't really, he really is a very untrustworthy narrator and stuff. So you can't really believe a lot of the things he says. So, sorry, my throat's dry. So, the character of Humbert, he's coming to teach in America and stuff like that. And he's looking for a place to stay. And so he finally finds this house with a room for rent and everything. And, in the original movie, the mother, her name is Charlotte, is played by Shelley Winters. In the remake, sorry about that. In the remake, she's played by Melanie Griffith. So he goes there, and she's showing him around the house, and she's talking about how great it is to have this literary man who's going to be living here, this intelligent man and stuff like that. And you could see that, Charlotte's kind of attracted to him, and you can tell she's a bit of a lonely woman, and she's kind of like, yearning for companionship and friendship and stuff like that. And he's, sorry, my throat again. So anyway, so he's kind of like not really sure. He's not sure if he's ready to make up his mind about the whole thing. But then she's all like, well, wait a minute, before you go, let me show you the backyard and everything else. And he's just kind of like, nah, okay, all right, I'll go ahead and I'll look at it. So she takes him out to the backyard, and this is when he's introduced to Lolita. And this here, in the original movie, the character of Lolita is played by actress Sue Lyon. And this is the first time you ever see her. And I'm pretty sure back at the time, when this movie first came out, I imagine this was probably, very, very like, whoa, just kind of knocked the audience off their feet. So anyway, now in the remake of the movie, the character of Lolita is played by Dominique Swain. And when we first see her in the movie, this is how she looks in the movie. And so in both versions, pretty much the minute that Humbert, the minute he sees Lolita, he's completely taken, entranced by her, and he wants to, that's what ultimately, makes his decision that he's going to go ahead and take the room. Now, I will say that there is one big difference from, now I just explained to you how in the original movie it begins with basically it starts at the end of the story, it starts with the climax, and then, everything is, showing you the events that lead up to it, kind of almost like a documentary in a roundabout way. Now, in the in the remake, the at the beginning of the movie, we kind of I believe this is in the book too. I admit I've never read the book, but I do believe that this element was in the book. We understand that in the beginning that Humbert, when he was a young boy, I think he was about 14 or something like that, that he had this relationship with this girl, and he was very much in love with her. She was 14 years old, and she was going to be the girl that he was going to lose his virginity to, and he was just madly in love with her. And then something happened; she got sick and she died, and so ultimately, Humbert becomes very disturbed by that, and you know, ultimately though too, it kind of ruins him in a way because he develops this mindset. This is in the remake. It's not really so much in the original movie, but it's in the remake that Humbert he mentally just feels that like he can only be attracted to an underage girl, a girl in that age range, from like 13, 14, something like that, because like I said in the remake, she basically kind of resembles for him that this long lost love of his that he's never going to have again and everything, and that she's going to just Lolita is going to basically fill that place in his heart. Now, in the original movie, basically, I guess just it's never really explained that there's not that motivation that he's that he ever had this relationship with this young girl or anything like that. That basically he just sees Lolita for the first time and he just falls in love with her. I don't know if it's creepy either way, so I can't really honestly say for sure if like having that bit of backstory motivation in the original movie or in the remake, I don't know if that really makes it any better as to what he's doing. It's still kind of gross and kind of creepy at the same time. But but anyway, nevertheless, in both versions, Humber does decide he's gonna go ahead and take the room for rent, and he's living with Charlotte and he's living with Lolita, and Charlotte is kind of flamboyant and she's kind of like always wanting to get his attention, and she kind of always wants to like impress him and all this other kind of stuff. But it's clear that Humbert is more interested in Lolita here, and even though Lolita is not particularly like, I mean, she's being friendly with him and stuff. At some point, she's kind of taking it just a little too far. Like, in both the original and the remake, there are moments where like he's in his room or something like that, and she comes and she sits in his lap, which he obviously he really enjoys it, um, but it's kind of like Charlotte is trying to, you know, begin this romantic relationship with Humbert, and it's like the problem is she always feels like Lolita is always getting in the way. And in the original movie, like at one point they go to this dance and they're chaperoning a dance, and really the reason Humbert goes along with it is because he just wants to be close to Lolita and pretty much keep an eye on her. And actually, I keep calling her Lolita. In the story, her name really is Dolores Hayes, but she goes by the name Lolita. But so like even at one point they're chaperoning this dance and everything else, and the big shot at the dance is Claire Quilty, and like I said, in the original movie, the character is played by Peter Sellers. In the remake, the character is played by Frank Langella. And Langella, it's like I could kind of maybe see. Hang on, sorry about the cut there. But anyway, going back to the what I was saying though, is like I can mainly see why that Langella was cast in that role because the idea is in this later on in the story that Lolita becomes attracted to Claire Quilty, and I mean, it's like in the story, Quilty is this, he's a professional playwright and he's this very well respected man and very popular man, and he's got like all these admirers and adorers, and even Charlotte goes and um, especially Shelley Winters. She does such a great job, and she's going. She's like constantly like trying to get his attention, trying to talk to him, and things like that. And so but the thing is like Peter Sellers wasn't really known as much of like a romantic leading man or anything like that. He was when you think of Peter Sellers, you always thought of him more as a comedian. Whereas like Frank Langella, I mean, it was easier for him because he had done these like romantic leading man roles, and he was to a lot of women he is considered like the sexiest man who ever played Dracula. Um, that was a pretty risque version when he played that. He had been a leading man in other movies and all this other kind of stuff. So he definitely had a sex appeal to women. So it's like it does kind of make a tiny bit more sense that they cast him in the remake because the idea would be that a young girl like Lolita would become sexually attracted to him and everything else. Whereas like it's kind of a teeny little bit harder to see that attraction in Peter Sellers, but they both that's kind of the thing. It's like they both bring their own presence to it, and I think it works. In both ways. You don't lose either way you see the movie. It's like Peter Sellers does a great job. Frank Langella, I think he does a pretty good job at it too. But anyway, so going back to the story, at one point Charlotte decides she wants to try to seduce Humbert. So she's like, well, the kids are going to go off over here. Well, Humbert, he's kind of like, wanting to get close to Lolita and everything else. And it's hinted at too that when she's trying to talk to Quilty that he remembers her because of Lolita. It's like, yeah, I remember you had this really beautiful daughter with this very lyrical name and all this other kind of stuff. And so anyway, so she decides she's going to go ahead and she's going to take Humber back and she's going to try to seduce him and stuff. And so they're dancing. She makes a nice dinner for them and she's trying to get them to dance. He doesn't want to dance and, he doesn't really want to, be, he's just not really, he's not into her at all. And then, he's actually relieved when Lolita comes home. But of course, Charlotte is actually very pissed about the whole thing because, she wanted to have some fun in tonight and all this kind of stuff. And Lolita kind of put a stop to that. And so, she comes home and Humbert, he's so happy to have her home. And he's like, going making her a sandwich and all this other kind of stuff. And so we see that there is a strain there between Charlotte and Dolores, Lolita, and everything else. And so, Humbert, he decides he's going to go to bed and all this other kind of stuff. And so the next morning, he's in his office and all this other kind of. And so, Charlotte's mad. She's cooking breakfast. She's mad because she didn't have any romance the previous night. And so she's, telling Lolita, go give him his breakfast and everything else. And so she goes up and, just like she's eating his bacon and stuff. She's like, don't tell mom I ate your bacon and stuff. And so she's sitting on his lap and stuff. And they're just kind of spending time together. And then it's, basically, it's revealed that she's going to go away to summer camp. And so he doesn't want her to go and everything else. But Charlotte is pretty much insisting that she goes to summer camp. And when she goes, then Charlotte professes her feelings towards Humbert, and she tells him she loves him, she wants to marry him, and if he doesn't want to marry her, then really he needs to basically pack up his stuff and go because she doesn't want him there. If she comes home and he's still there, she doesn't want him there anymore, and so he decides he's going to go ahead and marry her just so that he can stay close to Lolita here, and so they get married and all this other kind of stuff, and Lolita's like, she's fine with it and stuff. But so they're spending time together, and it's like, Humbert is not happy about this at all. And this is both in the original and in the remake. And he's, not enjoying his time with Charlotte or anything like that. I'll be right back. Just a second, please. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. I need a drink of water. So anyway, so we go back to that they've gotten married and he's not really enjoying spending any time with her. As a matter of fact, he's drinking a lot to kind of deal with the fact of having to be around Charlotte and stuff like that. And so, they start to make love and everything. And she tells him that she's thinking about when Lolita comes back from camp, she's just going to send her away to a boarding school. So she'll be she won't have to, be in their lives or anything like that, and it'll just be the two of them. This absolutely horrifies Humbert because I mean his whole reason for being there was that he wanted to be close to Lolita, and now Charlotte's basically saying she's going to send her away to a school where he'll never see her again, pretty much. And so he's, kind of trying to deal with that. And, Charlotte starts to get suspicious, and she goes and, she goes and looks through his papers, finds a journal that he's been keeping. And she finds out by reading his journal that, he has this, very strong attraction to Lolita, and Charlotte is horrified by the whole thing. She's sickened by the whole thing, and she's talking about like she's never gonna, you know, he's never gonna see her again. She's like, I'm getting rid of that brat, and and all this other kind of stuff, and so so Humbert at one point he's actually contemplating killing Charlotte because she's about ready to expose his secret that he's sexually attracted to Lolita and that he wants to be with her and all this. So he has a gun and he's loading it. And he's, trying to see if he can calm Charlotte down and everything. And then come to find out that Charlotte actually, she ran out of the house because she was going to mail some letters that, you know, basically letting people know what his intentions were and that he wanted to, get with Lolita and all this, and he would be done for. But on her way to deliver the letters to the mailbox, she gets hit by a car. And, just talk about a stroke of luck on Humbert's part. And he goes and he sees that she's dead. And, it's like he's able to keep his secret safe. And then, you know, neighbors come by and they're worried about him. And, they're worried about, they're grieving for Charlotte. And he's kind of, sort of grieving. He does feel a little bit of remorse for Charlotte, but he's not that bad about. But then he realizes the upside is that he can now claim Lolita as his legal guardian, which that's the thing that he really wants. He wants to have Lolita to himself, and so he goes and, like I said, I mean, Humber is really not the best character in this story. He really isn't. So anyway, he goes to this camp that he's going to get Lolita out of there, and he's going to basically take her with him. And at first, he doesn't let on. He doesn't tell her right away that her mother died. He's, a matter of fact, he tricks her and saying that, well, your mom is sick and she's in a private hospital. We have to drive up to see her. We have to stop at a motel. So they're driving along and everything else, and they stop at this motel for the night. And just by luck, it turns out this motel, Claire Quilty just happens to be there too. But Humbert is oblivious to the whole thing. He doesn't realize the guy who's there. So he, Humbert's trying to be smooth about the whole thing. He's trying to, you know, um, he's trying to like, get it to where he could be with Lolita and the two of them could be in a room and all this. And there's one bed, and he's kind of hoping that she would, go ahead and let him share the bed with her. But she's talking about like, aren't you going to go see about getting like a cot or something like that? And so he's downstairs. He's hoping. So he's just kind of hanging around, hoping that she'll go to sleep. And when she does, he'll just go in there, slip in beside her, and he has a conversation with a man that it turns out is Claire Quilty, but he doesn't know this. And so they're talking and stuff like that. And he goes up to see Lolita and realizes like, well, this isn't going to happen. And so he gets the cot and he falls asleep. In the morning, Lolita, she gets up and she starts, she goes and wakes him up, and he's telling her, you could go ahead and order breakfast and stuff. And she's like, well, I don't want to order breakfast. Let's play a game. And like, what game is that? And she talks about, I play these games at camp with boys and stuff. And, basically saying she does sexual games with the boys at camp. So we realize that, Lolita really isn't like she's not the most innocent person in the world, let's put it that way. And so, they have sex, and, pretty much it's a little bit more explicit in the remake than it is in the original. But in the original, it's just more hinted at that they go ahead and they have sex. So they do, and they're still on the road and everything. And so she's, Lolita keeps asking about her, her mom and everything else. And finally, Humbert's pretty much backed into a corner, and he has no choice. He has to pretty much tell her that her mom is dead. which of course, I mean, she's destroyed by this, and she's horrified and all this, and she's asking him, don't leave her. And which of course, I mean, he's not going to anyway. That's the last thing in the world he would want, is to let her go. So, he tells her he's never going to leave her and that they're going to be together and stuff. And, she's like, well, what about, my stuff? What about this, that? He's like, I'll buy you all new stuff. We'll go traveling and everything else. And he's like, I got a great job at this Beardsley College, which, Beardsley found out is not a real college. It's a made up name. But so they go to this town, and he gets a job teaching. The two of them are living together. Of course, they're passing themselves off as stepfather, stepdaughter, and all this, but they are having a sexual affair. And he's become insanely jealous of her. And he's like painting her toenails and stuff like that. And he's all talking about, like, she's asking him if she can audition to be in a play at school, and he's not really keen on the whole idea. And he knows that she's going, and she's talking to boys in her class and all this other kind of stuff. And so he's asking her about all these boys that she's running around with and stuff. And she's like, I'm just talking with them and everything else, and he's, basically like, what more do you want? You don't, it's like, I make the money, I buy you anything you want. This and that. And he's all like, it's like, what more do you want from me? She's like, all I want is for you, just let me do this play. And so he's like, okay, yeah. So he finally agrees to do the play. Well, at first he's very hesitant about it. He doesn't want her doing the play. And then come to find out, this psychiatrist comes to see him. Now in the story, the psychiatrist is actually Claire Quilty. And it turns out that Lolita does mention that the play is written by, the school play that they're doing is written by Quilty. And so, Quilty comes along, and he's, wearing a disguise, and he's basically telling, Humbert that it would be a good thing to let her daughter be in the play, that, he needs to let her, kind of get out more, mingle with people more and everything else, be more social and everything. So he's hesitant, but he finally does, let Lolita do the play. And so they're doing the play and all this other kind of stuff. Well, it comes to Humbert's attention that she's been, seeing boys after school. And of course, he's very jealous. And so he takes her home, and they get into a big fight. And, she gets mad. They have a screaming match, and she runs out of the house. So he goes looking for her, and he finds her basically at a payphone, and she's talking to somebody. And, when he gets there, he asks her, who are you talking to, this and that. And, she tells him, well, actually, I was trying to call you to tell you, to see if you could come get me, tell you where I was. And she's all like, you know what, let's get in the car. Let's get out of here, you and me, and all this other kind of stuff. I changed my mind, and, and everything. And so he's totally happy about the whole thing. So they're out driving around. They're going from place to place and everything else. He's getting teaching jobs, making money when and where he can. But, they kind of stay on the road. And at one point they're driving, and he sees, and this is in both versions too. He sees, this car, he realizes they're being followed. They're not sure by who. Of course, we later learn it's Claire Quilty. And he's starting to get really he's starting to get really panicked and everything else. And so, you know, Lolita, she starts not feeling well. And so he decides he's going to take her to a nearby hospital. And he does. He goes to a motel and he's resting. But when he goes back to check on her, he finds out that, he goes back to see if she's okay. Comes to find out she's gone. And that, she was, they said she was checked out by her uncle. And of course, Humber just literally flips out over this whole thing. And, he's fighting and all this stuff. And basically, they have to get him out of the hospital. And so he realizes that, Lolita's gone. He's lost her, doesn't know where she is, can't find her, not a trace of her. And he realizes that, Lolita just tried to get away from him. Well, she did get away from him. But then some time passes and everything. And then he finally gets a call from her that, she explains to him that she's married and that she's pregnant. They got a baby on the way and everything else. But the problem is she needs some money. Can he come and bring her some money? And so he goes to her, and at first he goes there. He's got the gun, and, he's got the intention of killing her husband, which he meets her, and they're kind of living this kind of hard scrabble life and everything else. They're, they just got married. They're not well to do and stuff like that. She turned 18, and so she married this guy. They're gonna start a family, and so she goes, and she introduces him as her stepfather, and the husband's a really nice guy, and he's shaking her hand and all this stuff, and so they get a moment alone, and so he basically he begs Lolita to come with him. She decides no, she doesn't want to, and so she tells him, "I'm not in love with you. I never was in love with you," and he's like, "I want to know what happened. Um, what happened to you at the hospital? I left you there. When I go back, you're not there. There's no way to find you." And so she explains to him that, hey, like, the entire time when I was with you is like I was never in love with you. I didn't want to be in a sexual romantic relationship with you. And she said, I didn't want you that way. And she's, explained that like she met and fell in love with Claire Quilty, and she respected him because of the writer that he is, and she really liked him as thought of him as an artist, and she really liked his mind and all this other kind of stuff, and she decided she wanted to be with him. And so Humbert, he's destroyed over this whole thing, and she's like she's like, oh, come on, stop blubbering, stop doing this and that, grow up and accept it, and he's all like, and he's trying to beg her to go with him and be with me, we can still have the baby and stuff like that. And um but she's like, no, this is not going to work. You got to understand, I'm not in love with you. I don't want us to be in a relationship. And so he gives her money and saying that like this is money that uh I think it was from her mother's estate or her insurance or something like that. And he gives her the money, say it belongs to her anyway, so he doesn't want it. And then that's kind of where the two movies really separate, because, like I said, the really interesting thing is that in the beginning of the original Lolita, like I said, Kubrick did a bold move, and he put the climax of the film at the beginning of the film. And so he leaves, and she's with her husband and all this kind of stuff. And so the original movie ends with Humbert driving through the fog heading towards Quilty's estate to kill him, and that's where the original movie ends. Now in the remake, it does it in a more traditional manner, in that the movie ends with Humbert going to Quilty's place, and Quilty's drunk and on drugs and everything else, and he learned Humbert learned that she ran off to be with Quilty, and then they were together for a while, but he wanted to start putting her in porno films and stuff. She did not want to do that, and that's when she got away from him. But she didn't want to go back to Humbert either, so the best thing she figured to do was get married. So that would put the end of that. So anyway, the movie ends with him going and see Quilty, and they chase through the house and all this other kind of stuff, and the movie ends with him killing Quilty. Okay, so that's talking about both movies, but let's see here. Now we talk about the actors. Now, first of all, let me just say, this is not a bad remake to the original movie. The original movie is a good film. You better sit down, though. This movie is a watch. This movie runs at a whopping 2.5 hours long. So this is a lengthy movie, but it's well worth it. It's a Kubrick film. Like, any Kubrick film, once you start watching it, you're hooked. You're going to watch it all the way through. And this movie's no exception. And this movie here is not bad for a remake. I do admit it does kind of kind of pushes the envelope a little bit more in terms of the sexuality and stuff. I'm Dominique Swank. I'm hoping she was 18 when she did this. I think she was a fresh 18, but I really do hope that she was 18 when she made this movie, because she is nude in the movie. You do see her topless and stuff in the movie, so. But yeah, it does kind of push the sexuality a little bit more. Where this movie here, I think they figured well to kind of like really kind of play down kind of the sexuality aspect of Humbert and Lolita's relationship. I think they would kind of just play more like that they're just kind of together and stuff. Where, like I said, this here more has more of a sexuality to it and stuff. But you got to remember, though, it is a sexual story because our narrator's Humbert, and he always saw Lolita as a sexual creature. So now talking about the actors, okay, now in the original movie you had James Mason playing Humbert. I already discussed Peter Sellers and Frank Langella playing Claire Quilty. So We're going to talk about James Mason and Jeremy Irons, and both actors. I have to say, the best part is like the lead actor. James Mason does a fantastic job. He's great. He's wonderful. He's got that. He had that great voice and just that look about him and everything else. And he was one of the most compelling actors to watch. And Irons is the same way. You got these two great actors that at the top of their game. Both of them do a great job in these movies. And I will say though, it kind of seems like if you ever notice, kind of look at Jeremy Irons' body of work. He's played some pervs in his lifetime though. He played a perv in this movie. There was a movie, was it Damages, I think it is, where, he plays a man who starts having an affair with his son's fiance. Dead Ringers, where he's twins and he's in these weird sexual games with women and stuff. Madame Butterfly, where he's a man who falls in love with a woman, turns out to be a man. So he's kind of played some pervs in his time, but he's still a great actor. He's wonderful in this movie. He does give a great performance, and yeah, I mean, um, as far as like Charlotte, Melanie Griffith, I kind of felt she was a little underused in this movie compared to Shelley Winters. Shelley Winters she's phenomenal in this. She is so much fun to watch, and Shelley Winters was just a great actress overall, and she really gets into it and she gives it 100%. She does a great job. She is so much fun to watch, and she really does. She plays a very simple. You feel sorry for her. Charlotte really is a tragic character. And that was one thing that I always thought Shelley Winters did really well, was she was always good at playing these kind of tragic characters. Even in movies like Poseidon Adventure or something like that, she always kind of played these, you liked her, but she was always these kind of like tragically doomed characters. So I kind of always felt bad for Shelley Winters a lot of the movies she was in. But, she was great. She did a fantastic job. Like I said, Melanie Griffith, she's a great actress too, and I think she did the best with the material she was given, but I still kind of seem to feel like she was a tiny bit underused in this movie, but she does a great job. But at the time, though, I think, when this movie came out, Melanie Griffith still looked fantastic, so I imagine there were probably, as a matter of fact, there she is right there. So, like, she still looked good, so it's kind of like, but I mean, I think that's one of the reasons too why they introduced that. But aside from it being part of the book, they just had to introduce the idea that Humbert he was just a man. That was his mindset, that because he was warped from childhood, that he had to have this young girl and everything. But I know people have discussed like it didn't was it really going to make that much sense that he was going to want to keep Lolita when she turned, because when he goes to see her, at the end of the story, she's 18 years old, she's married. On the one hand, he wants her to come back, but at the same time, it's like, would it really make sense that he would? In the original, it kind of does, because they don't introduce that aspect of, the young girl that he knew from his childhood. They didn't introduce that. It's like, so you could kind of buy it more in the original that he was just, infatuated with her. He wanted to be with her. It was just her, who she was, and everything. So it makes sense there. But it's kind of like, it kind of tends to make a little less sense in the remake because, you introduce that idea. It's like, well, now wouldn't she just be a little too old? And wouldn't he kind of like be more interested in trying to find another young girl of that age and stuff like that? So, but, yeah, this movie is definitely an Adrian Lyne movie. His movies have a distinct look to them. If you've seen Jacob's Ladder or you've seen 9.5 Weeks or something like that, Adrian Lyne movies kind of tend to have like a certain look to them, a certain ambiance to them. And this movie, you watch it, you definitely tell it is an Adrian Lyne movie. But honestly, it's like both versions work. This is for all intents and purposes, this is a decent remake to a Kubrick classic. So I'm actually kind of surprised, because you figure like Kubrick movies are so awesome and they're so well made that you really can't. You don't think you could actually redo a lot of his movies, but this is one of those times where it's like, actually, yeah, you can. This movie, this movie's great. It's a classic, but this movie works too. So, and I will say, this one, I don't know the exact time of this movie. It doesn't say on here, but I can guarantee you one thing: it's definitely not, 2.5 hours like the. Sorry, it just doesn't say on here, but I can definitely guarantee you, though, it's like this one here is not going to be much. This isn't going to be a butt tester like the original movie is, because, like I said, this runs at 2.5 hours. This one runs, I think it just runs about 2 hours. But yeah, I mean, it is an interesting story. It's definitely one of the most controversial stories in the world, and so it's like, just know what you're getting yourself into. It's a story about a grown man trying to have a love affair with an underage girl. We've already discussed movies like that. We talked about The Lover. I did the video on that. That's still on my channel. I talked about, I even did the one Private Lessons. That's on my channel, where in that version it was a grown woman having a sexual relationship with an underage boy. So. But anyway, though, yeah, we went ahead and we talked about Lolita. We talked about the original and the remake. I think I pretty much said everything there is to say, or that I need to say on it. Um, I do know this video is definitely running pretty long, so I need to get ready to end it here. But anyway, that's going to about do it. So if anybody took the time to watch all this, I thank you for doing it. I appreciate you for doing it. I honestly hope you enjoyed the video. I do apologize about the length of the video. If you did like the video, please like and subscribe. I do weekly videos. I do movie reviews. I do, haul videos, doing shelf by shelf of my movie libraries. I have some ideas for theme weeks and stuff like that coming up. And, I'd like to start announcing those here before too long. So anyway, please come back and till then, everybody, this is Cinema77, horror cult film lover. Have a good night. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.